Bet the board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Furman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast, NFL Week 7, Monday Night Football edition. I am your host, Todd Furman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. And Payne, I have a general idea where you're going, but as tradition states on Mondays, I have to ask how your morning's going, my friend.
Ran out of red ink. That's one of the tougher weekends that I think we have had in a while. And it started out great. Saturday was fantastic early in the day. And then you're like, boy, we're going to pile it on here. This is going to be a big Saturday. And then before you know it, you're left with two third-string quarterbacks playing in the second halves of games you're on. And that was the indicator that this might not be the best weekend you envisioned. Easily the worst Sunday we've had in a long, long time. And I'll be honest, we always go back and look. Very few bets I wouldn't have placed again on yesterday's card. A lot of negative variants all piling up at once. That was tough to witness. That's
always the challenging part, and I think people always go that don't do this and live and breathe the industry and or do this professionally. Go, well, you know, a bet that wins is a good bet, a bet that loses is a bad bet. If it was only that simple, on some levels, it would make this job that much easier to handle the inevitable ebbs and flows that come with the job. But to your point, I mean, you go back and you do a postmortem on all the games and try and figure out which was a bad handicap, which was a bad bet. And to your point, variance ended up being an evil, evil temptress there and put us on the wrong side of the ledger. But that's why you always have to have strong money management. A friendly reminder to us, like we always try and remind our loyal listeners, it is a marathon, not a sprint. And if you can't withstand the ups and downs that come with betting the National Football League or any sport over the course of the full season, then you may have to try and explore other recreational pursuits. But all right.
You hate to do it too, right? Because you're witnessing it live. You understand the losses, and then you have to go in and get kicked in the dick again by assessing what transpired, if it was a good bet, a bad bet. And ultimately, I think, you know, we get good feedback on mornings like this at times because the industry, if you go on social media, everyone's a large winner. So when you can get this perspective and a little bit different of a vibe from guys that consistently beat this market inside and out, and you can see that there are losing days and it's not all sunshine and rainbows. I think people like that aspect of things. But yeah, yesterday was tough. I mean, you know, the one specifically, you know, one of our biggest totals was Giants Jaguars over. I mean, I bet that thing over larger next time if I knew there was going to be nearly 900 yards of offense. So those are the kinds of things that we dealt with on Sunday after watching two third-string quarterbacks play for us Saturday evening in college football.
A little fumble inside the 5-yard line, a little game-winning drive that falls short on the 1-yard line. I mean, what could go wrong did go wrong, and that's part of why you have to keep your head on straight and make sure you're making smart choices, because the reality of this business is you're going to deal with variance, and when it all gets piled into one day, it makes things significantly harder to stomach on a variety of fronts. But as we always do around here, we break up the Monday podcast. We kick things off with the good, the bad, the ugly. We'll get into some of the look-ahead lines, injury updates from our man Deepak, and of course a breakdown of Monday Night Football between the Patriots and Bears. So Payne, to put us in a little bit of a positive mindset here, let's start with the good that you saw transpire so far during Week 7.
Do I just take the low-hanging fruit because it's obvious?
You can always take the low-hanging fruit around here.
Well, I see your notes, and it was going to be the same as mine, and I think obviously it was the most look-forward-to game of the day by fans and bettors alike, and it's Chiefs 49ers. I was downright shocked by what I saw, and you kind of put this performance in the context of the 49ers were one of the largest professional positions of the season, going from +3 down to pick 'em some places. And you have a 49ers defense that was third in schedule adjusted defensive efficiency coming into the game. And the one thing we said when we broke that game down was check the injury report. And it was all positive news for the 49ers. Bosa got upgraded. Hufanga was playing. Ward was playing. And then you got Trent McDuffie down for the Chiefs. And this was just a wild game. Kansas City spots the 49ers 10 points out of the chute. So it makes this performance all the more impressive. Chiefs were number 1 in EPA per play for Week 7. Every time the Chiefs ran a stat, they were expected to score half a point. I mean, it was just unreal. Nearly 58% of the Chiefs' offensive snaps were successful. And at one point, there was this 6-drive run where the Chiefs went 9 plays for 73 yards and a touchdown, 10 plays for 85 yards and a touchdown, 8 plays for 88 yards, had a touchdown called back for a phantom penalty and then missed the field goal, 3 plays for 33 yards and a touchdown, 9 plays for 85 yards and a touchdown, and 6 plays for 80 yards and a touchdown. All told, that 6-drive run in successive order, 45 plays for 440 yards and 5 touchdowns. And what we saw unfold there was, I think, exactly what the Chiefs thought about this offseason when putting this together, that Juju is going to be our underneath route runner who's physical after the catch. MVS is going to be our field stretcher that allows Juju and Kelsey to work underneath. And Hardman still isn't a perfect receiver, but he's best with the ball in his hands as a runner, so we'll spread the defense and make them cover every blade of grass with these end of rounds. And then you're looking at Kelsey, who's beating man coverage again over the middle because he looks completely healthy. Chiefs could have hung 50 points there, Todd.
Yeah, I mean, this was a Kansas City offense that looked like it was playing downhill. You mentioned the strength of the move. You look at the plays that the Chiefs had. I mean, the 49ers, a 3rd and 11, no problem. Kansas City, big play over the top. What was mind-boggling to me is I just felt like receivers were running free through the secondary, and I know a lot of that is obviously attributed to scheme, and it's a credit for what this Kansas City offense has done, and we kind of talked about it because it's a game that we went back and forth on. Do we take the 3 before we know the injury report or everything else? And it boiled down to a question of how much do you want to bet against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid coming off a loss. Still remains one of the best bounce back type scenarios you can find with an elite head coach and a quarterback that is in a class of his own, given what we've seen. I don't know if you saw the clip either, and if not, I'll forward it to you after the show. George Kittle indirectly calling out, I don't want to say Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo, but basically in a post-game presser saying we have to do a significantly better job as a team of getting the ball to our playmakers. It was short and sweet, and it begs the question, can this 49ers team, as we've seen time and time again, get things figured out offensively? Because fortunately for them, they don't have to go through the Kansas City Chiefs. They don't have to go through the Buffalo Bills if they're going to be NFC champions, and it appears to be Philadelphia and everybody else vying for that 2 spot.
There's no doubt about it. And you added Christian McCaffrey this week. You got both your tackles healthy who returned with Trent Williams and McGlinchey. Now is your time to make a run. And that's the reality of it. When you look at the talent, when you look at the NFC landscape, you're still thinking to yourself that the 49ers are the second best team in the NFC. And I don't know if there's a question about that. When you think about the scheme, when you think about the players this team has. That's ultimately what you envision here a little bit. Like, we didn't know if Christian McCaffrey was going to have a large role being traded that late in the week, but it's just another jolt to the locker room. And it just did not unfold that way.
It sends the message to the team that you're all in, given the significant draft capital they gave up. If you don't win a Super Bowl this year to try and compete with your neighbors to the south in the Los Angeles Rams, it's not exactly a ringing endorsement for where this organization will be headed, as questions obviously continue to swirl about Trey Lance and if he is the man to lead this franchise when he ultimately returns from injury next year. You took some of the low-hanging fruit with Kansas City. I'm going to do it with another AFC quarterback, and that would be Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. Second straight week, they shredded a below-average NFC South secondary. Burrow flirted with 500 yards and easily gets there, in my opinion, if the game was actually competitive and they were pushed. Led 4 straight touchdown drives to start the game, all of them traveling 70-plus yards, so there was nothing cheap about it. Boyd Chase combined for 16 receptions for 185 yards. T. Higgins, no slouch either, with 5 for 93. But most impressive, for all the criticism we had of the Bengals through the first 5 weeks, Joe Burrow's completion percentage over expectation the last 2 weeks, north of 11%. And Payne, again, you were the first one to point it out to me. They exceed expectations defensively. The adjustments that Lou Anarumo makes at halftime, even when the Falcons were chasing all afternoon, simply incredible, and they did it without the services of Trey Hendrickson.
This is a team to keep your eye on, because we're looking at back-to-back weeks where we saw the Bengals offense we envisioned coming into the season. Chemistry is a little bit better up front. Now, to your point, some of this is playing a disappointing Saints defense that can't get pressure and was down 3 starters in the secondary. A week later, it's Atlanta's defense that's bottom 5 in schedule-adjusted defensive efficiency and down 3 starters in the secondary for parts of the game. But there's also a fundamental shift that's happened. This is now Joe Burrow's offense again. Back-to-back weeks, Joe Burrow's been in shotgun on more than 95% of his snaps. The first 5 weeks, it was below 70%, where trying to run Mixon inefficiently from under center, just like we talked about last season when the Bengals weren't efficient. So again, bad defenses with severe injury problems in the secondary consecutive weeks, but a fundamental offensive shift from Zach Taylor's offense to Joe Burrow's offense, and it's paying dividends.
When you look at this Bengals team right now in the landscape of the AFC North, I mean, have they all of a sudden become the team to beat with some of the Ravens' struggles? The Browns are a dumpster fire, and clearly the Steelers are in rebuild.
I mean, your hope is the Trey Hendrickson injury isn't too serious, and it appears that's the case, right? And you're still waiting for DJ Reader to return on the defensive side of the ball, and you think your offensive line is going to continue building chemistry with 4 new starters from a season ago. And if you continue to do things the right way by making this the Joe Burrow offense, it's going to go a long way. T. Higgins battled an ankle injury for a couple of weeks. He looks like he's a little bit healthier as well. So running things more efficiently through Joe Burrow is the first step. We know what Lou Anarumo's been doing with the second half adjustments, and if you can get a couple guys healthy on that side of the ball, it'll go a long way for another playoff push here, because it's clear Baltimore has not separated from this division where they could clearly be 7-0 at this point, but they've thrown away 3 double-digit leads in the second half, and so they haven't created that distance in this division.
Yeah, they've left a lot of meat on the bone, and if you're a Ravens fan, you can't be feeling chipper this morning, knowing that you are 4-3. But to your point, that this team, worst case scenario, could be 6-1, 5-2, and if things had broken the right way and they hung onto those leads, sitting with an unblemished mark atop that division. Other good that you saw as far as takeaways for Week 7.
When you think about great quarterback, running back tandems and a duo you'd want out there to beat a good defensive mind in the greatest quarterback of all time, you look to P.J. Walker and Deontay Foreman.
DJ Moore off the milk carton into fantasy relevance is the only weapon.
Now, Carolina wasn't great with their down-to-down efficiency, but they were very, very explosive yesterday, and they finished 7th in EPA per play on the week. And you look at P.J. Walker, the game plan wasn't necessarily a game plan suited for him, because he came into the game with an average intended air yards of 0.1, and somehow yesterday was 8.2. And Walker's completion percentage was 9% above expectation, and then you sprinkled Deontay Foreman in there, who averaged 4.6 yards per rush over expectation. And I think when we zoom out and look back on the 2020 NFL season, this probably goes down as one of the anomalies, winning outright by 3 scores as a 13.5-point underdog. But kudos to P.J. Walker and Deontay Foreman, and as you mentioned, getting the leading receiver off of the milk carton. Made a fantastic catch there by the back of the end zone, a little toe tap there.
Friendly reminder why he can be one of the best weapons in any passing attack in the National Football League when he's got a capable quarterback. See, I'm proud of you. You went glass half full praising Carolina. I was ready to vilify and roast Tampa in either the bad or the ugly, and we may be able to get there as well.
Well, we can do that.
I do want to give one other player accolades, and I know from an efficiency standpoint the numbers don't blow you away, but Josh Jacobs was a guy that the Raiders had talked about not even potentially breaking camp as RB1, and all he's done over the last 3 weeks, 3 straight games carrying the ball 20-plus times, 3 straight games with 140-plus rushing yards, 3 straight games with a rushing touchdown, and has 6 over his last 3 games. Josh Jacobs running like a man possessed for a Raiders offense that needed somebody to come in, give them a little bit of the shot in the arm, because the passing attack has lacked some of the punch that we anticipated coming into the year.
We know the backstory of Josh Jacobs being homeless, living out of his car, and you don't have your 5th-year extension picked up. So he is in a contract year. And so you love to see this type of performance. It's the best 3-game stretch of his career, as you alluded to. 441 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns the last 3 weeks. And what's so crazy about this, you go back to the Hall of Fame game, and Jacobs is out there with the rest of the guys that didn't make this team, right? He was being showcased so the Raiders could trade him. So it's just wild to see this unfold. Before tonight's Bears-Patriots game, which we'll get to a little bit later in the show, Jacobs averaged 1.7 yards per rush over expectation. It was the 6th best mark among running backs. And the other thing that's quietly taking shape here is this is an offensive line that was much maligned, but they've been blocking quite well. And you pair that with Josh Jacobs being elusive and breaking tackles, and it's been the best part of this Raiders offense to date.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Raiders team that definitely needed a confidence-building win. It looked like it was going to be nip and tuck throughout. They found a level of separation there. And a team that was extremely unfortunate early in the year gets to the right side of the ledger, beating the Houston Texans by double digits. With the good comes the bad, and I'll let you be the bad guy first and foremost here. Where should we start?
Let's go to where we kind of hinted at the top. The Giants-Jaguars game is just so wild to me because you can have all the data in the world and the analytics and the matchups, but this is a little narrative-based, and I don't think it's necessarily hot takey, but you could see it unfolding right in front of your eyes where one team who's really mediocre doesn't believe they're merely average and thinks they should always win. And the other team simply doesn't know how to win yet, and there isn't a leader on that team guys look to or look at for confidence that acts as like a booster or a pick-me-up throughout the course of the game. And that's ultimately what you saw unfold there. And there was a battle in that game. Some guys early in the week laid the available 2.5s. Even when it got to 3, a group laid it. And then late, there was some buyback plus 3.5. And it was just this interesting element unfolded. And the Giants, give them credit again. They were 5-1 coming into this game. And their leaders offensively, and Dayball and Kafka, are smart enough to understand that they're probably a little fortunate. And they need to be doing things a little bit more efficiently early in these games because they're not going to be able to just come from behind every week. Now, I understand they were trailing at the half, but offensively, there were some better things there out of the Giants to start that game. And you also think about this, Todd. 2 linemen went down, starting tight end went down, and they were still able to battle back. But that was a game that just, 888 total yards, just 40 points. Jacksonville alone on the non-touchdown drives had 4 trips that touched the Giants' 9, 5, 20, and 1 yard line, and it resulted in a grand total of 3 points.
When you look at this Jaguars offense, I mean, for the year, they average about a point for, I'm going to butcher all this. The league average is 15.6 yards per point. The Jaguars yesterday were at 26.6. If they hit their normal metrics, you're talking about a scoring performance in the high 20s. And I guess along those same lines, when you look at the Jaguars, Payne, for all that optimism early in the year, should we start to become concerned with what's going on? Because they feel like a team that's really regressed over the last couple of weeks.
It's tough. I'm not quite sure the right answer there because you're getting good O-line play. They're creating some space for the backs. Travis Etienne has emerged. Getting healthier at wide receiver. Trevor Lawrence is just missing some throws. That's the missing component here. And it's a team that hasn't learned how to win yet. Anytime there's adversity, you can kind of just see it on their face and in their body language. But what makes this so difficult, right? And last week was that game where all of the numbers would suggest Jacksonville was the side, and a lot of people were questioning why that line was what it was. But Jacksonville, through 7 weeks, still top 10 in EPA per play, churning out a 47% success rate. And so metrically, it's been a pretty good team. Now, there's still some holes here or there, but it's just a team that hasn't figured out how to win yet. It's a team that doesn't have a leader yet. And that's ultimately why they're 2-5.
Yeah, it happens. You have to, like you always say, you lose big, you lose small, you win big. And it is a learning curve that can be extremely rigorous regardless of what kind of experience you have on a head coaching staff until a leader emerges with that team and you start to get the kind of quarterback play that they want from what they think is their franchise talent. The Atlanta Falcons, Payne, one of the more enigmatic teams. They go out there, they fight every week. They were 6-0 against the spread coming into the game yesterday against the Cincinnati Bengals. They obviously get saddled with an ATS loss, but that's not why I bring them up in the bad. What was more troubling for me, they trailed by 3 touchdowns early on in that game. They're basically operating for the better part of 3 quarters out of a negative game script. Marcus Mariota has 13 pass attempts, and you have 2 high-profile weapons and Drake London and Kyle Pitts that play absolutely no role. With the good comes the bad, and Arthur Smith, for as many accolades that I want to heap on him for getting this team to even being 3-4, I had no idea what I was watching unfold in their loss against the Bengals.
Yeah, I mean, they've won some games. They've played well in a couple spots. When they've stepped up in class, the scoreboards looked okay, but you look at those games that they did step up in class early on, they've been dominated, right? Some fluky stuff to come back, and that was ultimately the case here because we think the Bengals are, at this point, pushing towards one of the better teams in this league. And you mentioned Arthur Smith. I understand that he's got Marcus Mariota and he wants a run-first offense. But going into this game, think about this. You're going against a Bengals offense that appears to be getting on track a little bit. And you have 2 starters out in your secondary and another in A.J. Terrell trying to gut it out. You have to come up with a higher variance game plan offensively. And then all of the things that unfolded, which you just mentioned, right? Down 3 scores early, down 2 scores at break. You cut it to 2 scores by pushing it downfield. How do you have Mariota throw it 13 times all game? That's just absolutely nuts to me. It was one of the more inept things I've seen this week, and Mariota was actually efficient when Arthur Smith let him throw. And in a game like that, if London and Pitts are only getting 6 total targets, we're past the point of worrying for those 2 pass catchers if you're a fantasy guy.
I mean, London early on looked like he was going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread with his utilization rate. Pitts, I don't even know where to start there. I mean, he's been an afterthought all season long. When you use a top 5 overall pick on a tight end, you best try and get him involved. So a little bit head scratching to say the least. I mean, this is where it gets tricky in terms of bad or ugly. I wasn't sure how we wanted to go about it because obviously 2 teams should draw our ire. So we'll call it like a hybrid here. The Green Bay Packers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Payne. You know what? The hell with it. I'm putting them both in the ugly classification. What is going on with 2 veteran first ballot Hall of Famers in terms of leading their offenses that we keep thinking they're going to flip a switch and everything is going to be okay? It has been anything but for Green Bay, both on the offensive and defensive side, and Tom Brady, for the second time in as many weeks, looks ill-equipped to lead that offense. The Mike Evans drop notwithstanding on the opening series of the game.
Yeah, I've tried to avoid talking about some of this just because it's the national narrative stuff.
For sure.
And it's the social media stuff.
It's the cheap stuff that's out there.
You have, it's the old quarterbacks that are just, past their prime and, just send them to the glue factory. Like that's all of the talk. And it's just, there's so many things going on for both of these teams. I mean, Green Bay came into the week trying to fix their O-line by moving guys around. And then David Bakhtiari couldn't go. So what they tried working on all week and employing in this game became unusable. Okay, so the protection plan was void from the start. Green Bay was never going to be wildly efficient on the ground because Washington was a top 5 team in schedule-adjusted rush defense. And sure enough, Packers turned out a 31% success rate on run plays. And right now, there aren't many difference makers at receiver. Aaron Jones is easily the Packers' best pass catcher at this point. Dobbs is still young. Watkins is over the hill. You got a couple injuries in that receiver group, and the offense, which we kind of the last few seasons, even going 13-3, wasn't necessarily the most potent offense, and there were some issues there that you could see that were underlying, but Devontae Adams covered up for some of those things. And defensively, you've been wildly disappointing, but if you are a rational fan or someone that understands what they're watching, this was a defense that was built to play with leads. And they're not playing with leads, and so you can run on them. And so that's ultimately what's unfolding there. And the game was much more of a blowout than what the final score indicated. I mean, Taylor Heinicke did not start that game well. And there was a 3rd and 6 situation at midfield where a worst case situation for Washington's a punt and pin, and on 3rd and 6 he throws a pick 6. So and then you got your hold from the defense when Amani Rodgers fumbles the punt return and your defense does a good job holding Washington to 3 there. That game could have been much uglier than the final score indicated, and ultimately that's why you're seeing quite the adjustment in the Packers-Bills game. I will let you expound on that before we get to the Bucs.
Yeah, no, I think the points that you raise are apropos when you talk about this Green Bay offense. If you're a team that's used to playing with a lead, it's a lot of what we said about Kansas City. You go lighter, you go faster, you go more athletic, and you place an emphasis on players in the secondary. You're not looking for big bodies along the defensive line that want to try and play a game in a phone booth. And Green Bay continues to struggle against the run. And when you're trading scores, basically within a 1-score margin, it puts them in a difficult predicament. And that's kind of what we've seen. I mean, Washington was able to run the ball effectively with Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, and a variety of other players in that spot. And to your point, people look and they go, oh, it was a mild upset at 23-21. The game was never really that close. I mean, Green Bay was down 23-14. They score late. They do get a stop and get the ball back with a chance to try and tie it or take the lead, I guess, with a Hail Mary at the very end. But you dig into some of those numbers, the yards suggest that Washington should have won that football game going away. And it's rinse and repeat for Green Bay. When we get into some of the look-ahead lines, you'll see how that market has responded for the game against Buffalo on Sunday Night Football, where we'll see all of the warts potentially for Green Bay on full display under the bright spotlight of primetime football. Along those same lines, I mean, we talk about Green Bay and some of the struggles. Clearly, Tampa came into this season thinking that this was going to be the last ride with Tom Brady, and the offense, has really not been able to find its footing. A touchdown pass to Mike Evans obviously changes the dynamic, and we can point our finger at Brady all we want, but the offensive line uncertainty for Tampa has created a real problem, and you're starting to see that with an inefficient ground attack where it's not even a balanced offense at this point. Say what you want about injuries. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin are out there and operating somewhat close to full capacity. But Tampa's got to figure a few things out. And I think you point the finger not always at Brady, but the man calling plays in Byron Leftwich for the second straight week.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. Tampa's offensive line's regressed. The weapons haven't been 100%, or they're new, or they're, some suspension issues. Brady is obviously dealing with some things. And Byron Leftwich is horrific. And you put it all in a pot and you got shit stew. And that's basically what this Buccaneers offense is right now. And I think the concerning point here, and I know it's past the point of concern for many, but the Buccaneers came into this game against Carolina facing the 6th easiest schedule of opposing defenses. And specific to yesterday against Carolina, you mentioned it. The Buccaneers looked like they were searching for their confidence. They needed that initial boost. They were just dying to see something positive happen. Like, a three-point shooter just needs to see it go through the net. And Tampa could have got that early. 90 seconds into the game on first down, Tom Brady hits Mike Evans in stride for what would have been a walk-in 64-yard touchdown. I mean, it's a layup. Brady and Evans hit that in their sleep every single time. And that's arguably the worst drop of Mike Evans' career. And then you think about the next 2 possessions in the first half. Tampa reaches the Carolina 40 and 42-yard lines, punted both times. And on both those drives, once Tampa got in plus territory, Leftwich either ran on first down or he ran on second and long. And mind you, again, for the second week in a row, the secondary he was playing against was banged up, was beat up. Carolina was playing without its best 2 in the secondary. J.C. Horn was out with a rib injury. Jeremy Chinn's on IR. So it's a little bit of everything contributing to Tampa Bay's offensive woes right now.
Yeah, you can't just point your finger at one factor and say that all of a sudden this is the issue that you have to address and it's going to get that much better. So it's a slow process to try and rebuild. And as a result, Tom Brady, for the first time since 2002 through 7 games of regular season, has his team with a losing record sitting at 3-4. A team headed into bye, and this is the last thing I had on the ugly, so if there's anything else you wanted to add, by all means jump in here. The Los Angeles Chargers. I mean, this was a team that we talked about in the preseason preview having all of the talent in the world and the opportunity to be a little bit of a dark horse in the AFC playoff picture. It hasn't quite been the case, to say the least. They've dealt with a rash of injuries, largely on the defensive side. We know that the offensive line hasn't exactly been whole and won't be all season long. They made it a focal point to try and go out there and address a leaky run defense last year. Well, Kenneth Walker was able to generate the highest speed for a running back in terms of the open field, if you look at some of the NFL's next-gen stats. And the Seattle Seahawks basically went into SoFi Stadium and took the Chargers' lunch, sending the Chargers into the bye week at 4-3.
Got out early, 17-0. Now, generally speaking, the Chargers defense has been worse against the run than the pass this year. And prior to this game against Seattle, the Chargers were 11th against the pass, 22nd against the run and schedule adjusted efficiency. And it's somewhat similar to the Packers, right? The style of this defense is built to play with leads. It's built to play with opposing offenses, forced to pass in known passing situations, and you let Bosa and Mack get after the quarterback, and you loaded your secondary. And right now, J.C. Jackson hasn't played well and is injured. And it just has not unfolded the way they envisioned it, specifically offensively, right? It's just like one hand washes the other. And when you're beat up on offense with O-line issues and wide receiver issues, and you're playing dink and dunk football offensively, and you're not building leads, this style of defense, despite all of the names, is not performing to the level we thought they would. And specific to yesterday, I mean, the Chargers weren't horrific stopping the run if you strip out the 74-yarder from Kenneth Walker late when the game was already over.
It inflates a lot of the totals.
Yeah, I mean, Seattle had a 38% rushing success rate on the day. And to me, again, it was more about Geno Smith and the pass attack. And for a large stretch, DK Metcalf was out. I mean, Geno's performance this season is arguably the most what the fuck, where did this come from thing that we have seen in our history. Like, what quarterback can we go out there, and I haven't looked into this, but it's just like, what quarterback after 10 years of bottom line unserviceable play steps into a situation which we all thought was dog crap, and he was going to be basically a bridge quarterback to get them to lose enough games to where they could draft Young or Stroud or whoever they deemed the top guy. And it's been just the complete opposite. Even yesterday, I mean, Geno's dropback EPA, positive 0.28. Completion percentage, 12% over expectation. Third best mark of any quarterback that's played so far this week. I don't know what I'm watching. And they have full confidence in Geno. They came out and said, we're going to chuck, we're going to go tempo, we're going to build the lead. And then we're going to get our ground game going. And they executed that game plan to perfection yesterday.
It's pretty wild to watch, and we have to be careful what we say because those are your first place NFC West Seattle Seahawks at 4-3 right now through the first 7 games of the season. Something I didn't think we were going to say when we broke down this division, but maybe Pete knew potentially what he had there. The team looks fast, they look athletic, and clearly playing with a ton of confidence. You can follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Furman. You can follow me there as well. Most importantly, as always, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod for all sorts of updates, not just on the college football and NFL side, but all sorts of discussion of sports memorabilia and the NASCAR playoffs that have 2 races remaining. Look ahead line.
I understand you got some USC folks in the family now, but Pete Carroll didn't even know who his starting quarterback was this year. I mean, there was a stretch there like 10 days before the season. We might be starting Drew Lock.
He wanted
here.
Competition, Payne. He wanted to have Drew Lock out there, and you know what? There might be Broncos fans that wish they had Drew Lock back instead of the money that they committed to Russell Wilson at this point in the season.
The idea that Pete said he's got a fast team this offseason was about just chew the bubblegum, Pete. I mean, he's got a quarterback competition he didn't understand was right in front of him, and no one did. And, I mean, just really, really, really sharp money. Under 6 wins on Seattle, and that is going to be a burning ticket possibly before we carve the turkey this season.
What a marquee game on the docket this weekend between the Seattle Seahawks and the New York Giants, something I never thought I would say coming into the season when I looked at the Week 8 schedule. All right, some of the look-ahead numbers, and we can buzz through these pretty quickly. A couple of these games will make our big breakdowns on Thursday's show. The Tampa Bay Bucks, you can understand why this was the case. They go from a field goal favorite at home on a short week as they'll play host to the Baltimore Ravens. Now pretty much a 1.5 point underdog across the board.
Yeah, I mean, a little money this morning on the Bucks. It like 1, and you're looking at some sharper shops now back to 2. But it's just what we discussed, right? Tampa Bay's offense is struggling right now. Baltimore has the possibility to be a 7-0 football team. Again, did enough yesterday to win, but didn't put the Cleveland Browns away when they were up double digits. So that's what you're seeing here, right? Another Bucs loss, a Baltimore team that probably should have more wins in the W column, and we see that adjustment. It'll be ultimately interesting to see where this line goes from here, because we did see just a touch of Bucs money early Monday morning. Yeah,
an interesting number nonetheless. I mean, as we continue to see a game that should have been one of the marquee matchups on Thursday Night Football loses a little bit of a luster, but clearly desperation could start to set in for both of these sides. New Orleans Saints playing host to the Las Vegas Raiders. A 3-point move, but through no key numbers here. The Saints were a 1-point favorite on the look-ahead price. We now see the Raiders modest 2-point road favorites. Plenty of questions swirling about the health and status of some key contributors for the New Orleans Saints.
Yep, the move through 0. It's 3 points in numerical number, but certainly not in value. We don't really know what the Saints are, but appeared to have gotten blown out on national TV Thursday night. Obviously, multiple pick sixes and turnovers in the end zone will do that. And the Raiders went out there, and despite kind of being, I would say, lackadaisical for about 3 quarters, do end up covering that number. And ultimately, that's what's transpiring here. It'll be interesting to see what the Saints throw out there offensively. Is Landry going to be back? You get kind of the mini bye. Is the offensive line going to get a touch healthier? Who do we have at quarterback? We'll see how this takes shape. But again, it's not the move that you think it is going through the 0 at this point.
More impactful for teaser bettors than anything else when you're trying to figure out win probability and how the odds makers are adjusting to it. This number I found interesting moves through 2 secondary key numbers, and one of the teams was on a bye. The Minnesota Vikings look ahead price -6 as they'll welcome in the Arizona Cardinals. Now we're seeing a consensus of 3.5 out there. And to your point, Arizona may have won the football game on the scoreboard, but I'm not sure they fixed everything that ails them other than reintroducing DeAndre Hopkins into the offensive flow.
Cardinals are back, baby. You're right. Now,
the St. Louis Cardinals maybe, but
we talked a little bit about this last Thursday, and the Cardinals defense is trending a little bit better. Got Hamilton healthy in the secondary, getting a little bit more pressure. Let's keep the eyes peeled on the injury report for the Cardinals offensive line here. And obviously, the data was there on the look-ahead line, but I think you could make the case that although we're wildly happy the Minnesota Vikings have 5 wins right now, they are certainly one of the early season overachievers. They haven't played a great schedule. They've dilly-dallied with some of those games, and they could have certainly had a couple more losses than what they currently have. And I think the market and bettors within that market are kind of understanding that a little bit more now.
The Vikings have been as lucky in 2022 as they were unlucky last year. So all the wins we thought they were going to compile and accumulate last season, they're getting some of the breaks now. And to your point, obviously why they sit at 5-1 despite metrics that don't suggest that the football team is nearly as good as their record indicates. Interesting move for the Rams and 49ers. Again, through the 0, not across any key numbers. The Rams were 2.5-point home favorites for a revenge date with the San Francisco 49ers. The Niners get boat raced by the Kansas City Chiefs, but it didn't stop odds makers from reopening the 49ers as 2-point road favorites.
Yeah, I just think they understand that they're a little bit healthier now. You know, when this look-ahead line got produced, McGlinchey was highly questionable, and some thought that could be a multi-week injury, and then Trent Williams returned, and you trade for CMC, and defensively you got Bosa back and Ward back. And so, to me, the move through 0 here just indicates that the San Francisco 49ers are a much healthier football team, and that's why we're seeing
it. Completely fair. We did see some movement as well on the Sunday Night Football game, but I know we'll preview that game in depth between Green Bay and Buffalo, so may hold that one back until we get to it.
Oh, joy. Get to talk about Green Bay's offense.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can pick one factor in that game, do a 2-minute handicap, and I think it'll do plenty of justice for Green Bay Packers fans that have been eerily quiet all season long as this team tries to figure things out. With the good comes the bad, comes the ugly. Look ahead lines, but there are also injuries. We know that's a big part of the National Football League, not just for sports bettors, but for fantasy players alike. And we have one of the best in the business to share his perspective on how what we saw transpire during Week 7 could impact your favorite team going forward.
Are you injured or are you hurt?
When injuries occur in the NFL, you need someone to call on.
If you're hurt, you can still play. If you're injured, you can't.
Let's check in with Dr. Deepak Chona, Stanford and Harvard trained orthopedic sports surgeon and founder of Sports Med Analytics, the industry leader in data-driven injury analysis.
So are you hurt or are you injured?
All right, well, thank you, Todd. I am pumped to bring you your Bet the Board injury report. Tons to talk about this week, so we will dive right in, starting with Breece Hall. Now, the video was concerning for an ACL tear. His coach essentially confirmed those suspicions. An ACL for Breece Hall would average 10 months to return, so he'd have an excellent chance to be ready for week 1 of next year. Performance does tend to lag behind. We have seen recently Saquon Barkley last year have an entire off year after the ACL. I wouldn't necessarily expect the same from Breece Hall, but it would be likely week 6 to 8 before you're looking at his performance recovering. Then you have DK Metcalf. His video of the injury was actually concerning for an ACL as well. His knee bent inwards, it internally rotated, and then you see a little bit of a jerk to the knee. And we do have negative x-rays, but that doesn't really tell us much. This is something diagnosed on MRI, which will very likely happen on Monday. Hopefully the video lies, but that's going to be the concern going forward for Metcalf. Then we have David Njoku. He was seen after the game in a walking boot and on crutches. The combination suggests a high ankle sprain, and usually these average about 2 to 4 weeks. They do vary a little bit based on severity, and he'll get an MRI Monday to probably assess that. Usually players would miss at least one game. I know Njoku said he would be back soon, but I would lean towards him missing week 8. Then you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, now in the concussion protocol. With the new concussion protocol, we're averaging a little more than 7 days for players to get cleared, and that means very slightly over 50% chance that Amon-Ra St. Brown misses week 8. When players do return, they don't tend to have much impact on their performance, so statistically the most likely outcome here is a week 9 full strength performance. Then we have Allen Lazard. The mechanism and him blocking a player when really pulling himself out for a shoulder injury suggests something that an injury to his labrum. He'll probably get an MRI today, Monday, and then we'll know for sure. Now, in most cases of shoulder injuries for wide receivers, they would be able to return within 2 weeks. He did return to the game, didn't necessarily produce much and wasn't a long return to the game, but overall suggests that Allen Lazard would be able to play next week. Then we have Mike Williams, and we're lucky on the Chargers side that they have a week 8 bye, because Mike Williams looked like he had a high ankle sprain based on the video, and it looked relatively severe as well. He does have a chance to play week 9, but these average 2 to 4 weeks, usually for wide receivers, closer to the 3 to 4 range. So most likely you're going to not see Mike Williams out there for a week or 2. Then you have J.C. Jackson. Now, they're reporting his diagnosis as a dislocated kneecap. And if you may remember back a couple years, Patrick Mahomes had the same diagnosis and missed 2 games from this injury. The key with these is that sometimes when the kneecap dislocates and then pops back into place, you can chip off a piece of bone. And depending on how big that piece is, that can require surgery to go in and fish it out so there's not a loose chunk of tissue floating around in the knee. Now, we'll see after the MRI, probably on Monday, but J.C. Jackson, I would guess, misses 2 games if he doesn't have a loose piece like that, and if he does, probably closer to 3 or 4. Then we have star pass rusher for the Bengals, Trey Hendrickson. He left the game with a stinger, and essentially that's good news for Bengals fans and for Hendrickson, because stingers, while pretty serious, they cause a pretty severe sudden change with a pinched nerve in the arm. But overall, they recover very quickly, and they recover to full strength very quickly. So I would expect Trey Hendrickson to be out there next week and looking like a full strength player. Then we have Giants rookie tackle Evan Neal. He has an MCL injury reportedly, going to get an MRI Monday almost certainly, and there are a subset of these that need surgery and a longer time. but the vast majority end up being 2 to 4 week injuries for offensive linemen. Then we have updates on running back DeAndre Swift. He was dealing with an ankle and a shoulder issue. He did practice in a limited fashion all week. My guess is the ankle is more likely the reason that he missed rather than the shoulder. The ankle timelines do tend to be a little bit longer than what he likely had on the shoulder was an AC joint sprain. So based on his practice pattern, I would expect DeAndre Swift to practice all week again and then probably play week 8. Then an less optimistic outlook on J.K. Dobbins. So he's going to have surgery. It's very likely to clean up a meniscus or cartilage issue. This isn't really terribly uncommon after the major multi-ligament surgery that he had last year. And our data bodes well overall for his short-term recovery. Running backs do tend to return to the field from this type of procedure at an average of about 5 weeks. By the 6th week, they're generally back to their pre-injury explosiveness as measured by per play production. The key is, though, that young running backs who were highly drafted like Dobbins do tend to see slow ramps back up, and that's probably because their teams see a long future with this running back. So don't be surprised if the Ravens take as many as 4 games before giving Dobbins a full workload. For the long term, however, this is pretty bad news, and second surgeries for these tend to lead to shorter careers, more durability issues, and missed games over subsequent years. We certainly hope this isn't the case, but it could be a brewing Todd Gurley type of situation. And that is all for today's report. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Obviously, most notable pain from that list was the injury that Deepak started his segment with. Of course, Breece Hall, Rookie of the Year frontrunner. We saw some of that burst in the explosion leading to the Jets' first touchdown against the Denver Broncos when he looked like he was shot out of a cannon. But we know Jets fans can't have nice things. They have a young, exciting core that they're building around defensively, but Michael Carter will now take over RB1 responsibilities as Breece Hall appears to be on the shelf for 9 to 12 months.
Not positive there. It's interesting how he quickly became the front runner there after about 2.5 games of good production.
That's pretty much all it takes in those awards markets these days.
Yeah, and obviously let's see what the workload that Michael Carter can handle. Zach Wilson still is throwing the ball really short and not overly efficiently, but this seems to be quite a large loss because Breece Hall was a factor out of the backfield. He provided that pop, a little bit more physical runner. Michael Carter certainly has that burst, but Breece Hall at that size is a dynamic weapon, and he was certainly coming into his own, and you could even tell in runs that aren't highlight worthy. So becoming a little bit more of a patient runner. He's hitting holes a little bit harder, and you could just see him starting to really develop. So that's a tough loss for the Jets, and they continue to get hit by the injury bug a little bit here on offense.
Yeah, I mean, incredible start for the Jets this season, and they're dealing with a rash of injuries. We'll see what that offense looks like going forward. Obviously, expectations getting ratcheted up by the week for where they set up, not only in their own division, but in the pecking order for the AFC, despite not having an offense that really scares you week in, week out. DK Metcalf appears to be the one that we're going to want to keep tabs on as well. We saw him leave the game, one catch for 12 yards. As Deepak indicated, X-rays being negative say one thing, but the MRI should be much more conclusive. So I think that's something that we're going to want to monitor after all the accolades we heaped on Geno Smith. Clearly, he didn't feel the negative impact without DK out there, but if DK is out for a prolonged period of time or potentially this season, it obviously puts D. Eskridge in a much higher profile role and changes what this team can do in its aerial assault.
Eskridge, interesting. Might finally get him off the milk carton. Where did they draft him, by the way?
Way too high, like Seattle does for every skill position player they've drafted over the last handful of years.
It did make me chuckle. There was a comment within that Chargers game where, boy, Seattle's drafted extremely well. And certainly this year there's a couple guys there that look like they have potential to be cornerstone pieces. But, boy, that had been an ugly organization for drafting 3 or 4 of the past couple of years, right? Like, just not very good.
A tremendous
they
leap
finally hit it.
Tremendous leap of faith. Eventually, when you draft in certain spots, you're due to land an impact player, and for the Seahawks, Kenneth Walker hopefully can be that guy, knowing that Rashaad Penny is lost for the season. A variety of other aches and pains. I know the Chargers hit pretty hard by the injury bug. They'll be off the bye week. We'll see what they get out of Mike Williams coming back, and of course, J.C. Jackson with a dislocated kneecap. You're going to want to sit and monitor that and see if he misses a couple games like Patrick Mahomes or if it's something more serious. But J.C. Jackson gives us the perfect segue into Monday Night Football, and his former team will be on full display with the New England Patriots. More than a touchdown favorite as they'll welcome in the Chicago Bears. We'll call it 8.5, pretty much painted across the odds board. The over-under on this game, 40, and all I see is 140.5 out there. No totals hanging out in the 30s. Some weather in the forecast for Foxborough. Looks like rain. The wind didn't look too bad, at least early on here on a Monday morning. As far as pace and tempo is concerned, this could be one of the slowest games of the entire NFL Week 7 schedule. The Patriots outscoring their opponents 67-15 in their 2-game win streak. Meanwhile, the Bears have struggled mightily when you look at Chicago in primetime, losing 9 straight under the bright lights, going 1-8 against the spread during that streak. And the Bears have scored a robust 41 points amid their 3-game losing streak. When you look at Chicago offensively, I mean, this is the definition of low-hanging fruit. Is there a path to a level of modest success against a Bill Belichick coach defense with a sophomore quarterback under center?
Yeah, tough to see. Okay, and Bill Belichick went on this diatribe in his presser about all the good things he's seen from Justin Fields and the Bears offense.
Yeah, that never leaves you excited as an opposing fan.
That immediately was like, oh, this could be a tough one. Now, we know Chicago likes to run the football. Certainly, the Patriots defense has been susceptible to that at certain points within this season. But across the board, the Patriots have played the toughest schedule of opposing offenses through 6 weeks. And now they get a very one-dimensional, archaic Bears offense that's 30th in schedule-adjusted offense efficiency. And you look at the potential changes from week to week. New England just played a run-first offense in the Browns last week that have a superior offensive line and running back group to what the Bears currently have. Now, it sounds very optimistic and smart that we might get a larger dose of Khalil Herbert, who's been the wildly more efficient runner. Talking about whoever has the hot hand is who they're going to go with. We've seen a little bit of a shift. We talked a couple of weeks back where the Bears offense was dead last in pass rate over expectation on early downs. They're starting to throw a little bit more out of necessity because they've been trailing in the last couple games. But ultimately, I don't know what you can put on Justin Fields' plate because we've seen Bill Belichick really have game plans to give young quarterbacks a world of trouble. And ultimately, you mentioned some of the pace and the tempo. You mentioned some of why these teams are a little bit lower scoring because they like to run the ball. I just don't know if Justin Fields, even off the mini bye with extra time to prep, is going to offer anything that gives Bill Belichick trouble this evening unless they just go out and are the more physical team and manhandle the Patriots defense in the trenches. And that might give them a fighting chance to stay within this number if they're able to run the ball.
You mean you're not optimistic about a Bears offense that has 63 completions as a team on 115 pass attempts, both the fewest by any team through 6 games since the 1982 Patriots, or the fact that the Bears' pressure rate is through the roof despite not throwing the ball all that often? Those aren't recipes for success against New England's defensive front?
No, I mean, there is a path here, right? The path is that you're able to run the ball. You're able to chew up some clock. The weather that you mentioned, rain, potentially creates some slick balls, and you can maybe get a turnover or two, and Justin Fields doesn't turn it over, and Mac Jones is a little bit rusty and not 100%. Like, those are the avenues to covering this number that's above a touchdown. But there's not many paths, right? There isn't like a secondary pitch to go to here.
Yeah, it's a little bit problematic for the Bears as they try and figure out what they have in a sophomore quarterback. Not the ideal matchup in this spot, even with the potential season debut of former Patriot N'Keal Harry to give the Bears an additional weapon in that receiving room. Other side of the ball, we saw all week long speculation about who was going to be the starting quarterback. It appears by all accounts that Mac Jones will regain his QB1 title. And when you look at how Bailey Zappi led the offense, this has to be about Mac Jones minimizing mistakes, cutting down on some of the poor interceptions he threw early in the year. But fortunately for Mac, this could be a ground and pound type affair. Damian Harris back dealing with that hamstring injury. We've seen what Ramondre Stevenson can do. And for the Bears being a halfway decent pass rush and actually being good in pass coverage, they've had a lot of vulnerability when it comes to slowing down opposing ground attacks.
Yeah, I mean, listen, your hope is that Mac Jones isn't returning too soon because, the media, who rarely can have educated discussion, wants to drum up drama and talk about Bailey Zappi taking his job. I like Bailey Zappi. I think we all know he can throw a football. We saw it at Western Kentucky when he was setting all kinds of records, but sometimes you kind of have to take a step back. And, Bailey Zappi's played better than you could have hoped for. Certainly better than the alternative, right? But you couldn't have handpicked two better defenses to play against. I mean, Bailey Zappi got the 31st ranked Browns defense in schedule adjusted efficiency, who was dealing with injuries, and then the 32nd ranked defensive team in Detroit, who was also dealing with injuries. And at the same time, Bill Belichick's defense put Zappi in positive game script because the Patriots gave up on average 7.5 points in those two starts. So Zappi didn't have to really throw with pressure due to game state.
Payne, that doesn't fit the narrative.
So.
That doesn't fit the narrative. You can't come in with reason, logic, and actual stats. That's not what we're talking about here.
Sometimes you just have to, let things play out and gather enough data and have larger sample sizes and kind of to your point, right? Everyone loves the backup quarterback. Fans love him. And everyone on Twitter from the betting community that wants to appear sharp can tweet out, hashtag Zappy Gang. And because for some weird reason, right, they believe if they start that movement, it gives their acumen credence because they called the small school quarterback as being better than the Alabama kid. So, just kind of stop, take a step back, breathe a little bit, let this thing play itself out. And certainly there's whispers within that organization that they like Bailey Zappi, that he's a little bit more willing to run the offense they want, and Mac Jones wants a little bit more of an aggressive offense, and right now that's not how the team's potentially built. So we'll see what unfolds. Now, specific to tonight's game, the Bears defense hasn't shown an ability to stop the run this season, right? They're 27th in defensive rush efficiency. The schedule of run offenses the Bears have faced through 6 weeks is below average, 19th toughest. And now you get a Patriots offense that's third in EPA per rush. So a big step up in class here. You look at the Bears, more than 48% of the yards they've surrendered this season have come on the ground. That's most in the league. So Ramondre Stevenson should have a good night here. New England should be able to take advantage on the ground. I think your hope is that Matt Patricia helps Mac Jones the way he's assisted Bailey Zappi. And we know that play action's a cheat code, and you don't necessarily have to run it efficiently to throw with play action, but when you're as efficient as the Patriots running, play action works even better. And for some reason, Mac Jones has only thrown with play action on 10% of his pass attempts this season. Bailey Zappi, 32%. So if you can get a little bit better of a game plan for Mac Jones in terms of when he passes the ball and putting Mac Jones in better positions to succeed, you would think New England's going to have some success here offensively when you look at the matchups, when you look at the areas that New England's been strong in, and you look at where the Bears are both void of talent and how they're defending certain parts of the field. New England should have some success here offensively, Todd.
Yeah, I mean, you raise an excellent point talking about the strength of the ground game. The Bears have been vulnerable with some young players in their secondary, specifically in the slot. So we'll see if Hunter Henry can continue to get on track, what that may look like for Jacoby Myers, who appears to be the true number one receiving threat for Mac Jones, at least over the course of last year and even early on this season. But a game, it's still football. It doesn't offer a ton of intrigue. We'll see exactly how things unfold tonight at Gillette Stadium, potentially with some, as we mentioned, some weather in the forecast where the Patriots have thrived in the past. We'll see how Justin Fields carries his end of the bargain. You can follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Furman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. Payne, any final words of wisdom, nuggets, tidbits, things you'd like to share with our loyal listenership before we reconvene on Wednesday to talk a little bit about college football?
Back to work so we can clean up the blood.
Hey, There will be blood. It is the unfortunate reality of this business. You hate to run out of red ink.
Good movie.
Tremendous movie. You hate to run out of red ink sometimes when you're marking down your sheet, but shit, like we always joke, if we ever had good luck for a full season, this business would be way too easy. We'll build back like we always do, and thankfully it came out of a little bit of profit sharing from early in the season. So for Payne Insider, I'm Todd Furman. Best of luck with all of your Monday Night Football investments, wherever they should take you. We'll be back with you on Wednesday for college football, Thursday for the NFL, and in the meantime, hopefully we'll see you at the window.
Thanks for listening to Bet the Board. You can catch Todd and Payne every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday during football season, breaking down the biggest NFL and college football games. And to make sure you don't miss any free best bets, subscribe to Bet the Board on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.